Hello YouTube, Mr. Mags here. The dark typing was introduced in Generation 2 with Pokemon Gold and Silver. However, there wasn't actually a dark type gym leader until 20 years later with Pokemon Sword and Shield. There were certainly other dark type specialists, and the dark types got used other places, but no region could claim they had the first dark type gym leader until Generation 8. And because of that, I thought it would be a lot of fun for me to go over every single region and determine what I believe would be the best dark type gym leader for every region. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my presentation where I create a new dark type gym leader for every single region. Okay, here's my presentation where I'll be creating a new dark type gym for every single region. This is actually hopefully the beginning of a new series I'll be doing on this channel where I'll be giving uh a new type of gym for every single region just like this one. So if you like this video or have any, comments, criticism, concerns, just any thoughts in general, please let me know so I can improve for future videos in this series. But for right now, let's get right into the criteria for how I generated these teams. First off, the gym leader teams and position will be chosen based on the dark types native to that region. So this does a couple of things. First, um, it would be pretty easy for me just to say, oh, here are the 4 or 5 best dark types. This will make the eighth gym, and then work backwards from there if you want to, say that this region should have you know, a dark type second gym, sixth gym, etc. But instead, I wanted to make choices with this video. I wanted specifically to take the dark types that are native to the region, so ideally Pokemon that are first introduced in this region or Pokemon that evolve into Pokemon that are native to this region, like how Sneasel evolves into Weavile in Gen 4. Take those Pokemon, look at them wholesale, and determine what position of gym leader I think will be best for this region. I will use the version of the region that has the most options. So, for example, Platinum for Sinnoh, so I could potentially include Houndoom or Absol if I needed to. Black 2 and White 2 for Unova, etc. For this video, this is mostly for the fact that Generation 1 didn't have any dark types available. However, in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, there were some dark type regional variants that were accessible in those games. So that'll be relevant in just a second, but in general, I'll be using the more, expanded version of the Pokedex. Next, I will not be reusing any aces of any canon dark type gym leaders or Elite Four members in the region of, in question unless necessary. This is mostly future proofing for future videos. Like, for example, when I eventually get around to the electric variant of this video, nearly every single region has an electric specialist. And I wouldn't want to just say, oh, the electric specialist from Hoenn would just have a main electric and a couple other electric types. I want to be a little more creative with this teams and kind of force myself to look at everything available and not just essentially create essentially the ideal version of teams that are already there. I want to, again, make creative choices with this video. So in this case, um, for example, with the dark type in Hoenn, I won't be using Absol on that team because that was Sydney's ace, unless I absolutely had to. I didn't have any other options. However, all Pokemon from all other major trainers are fair game, whether that be other gym leaders, other Elite Four members, villain teams, rivals, just any other Pokemon across the entire region are available. So, for example, in Sinnoh, Aaron's Drapion, Cyrus's Honchkrow and Weavile, those are fair game because they're not Dark type gym leaders or Elite Four members. And this last one here, the gym leader's overall strength will be based on the canon gym leaders of the region in question, if not a little stronger. So, for example, um, if I say that the dark type gym leader, let's say of Gen 6, should be the fourth gym leader. I would want the Pokemon that are on that team to be around the same tier of strength as the fourth gym from that region, if not slightly stronger. And that's kind of a case by case basis. That one will make a lot more sense as we go. And again, if you have any thoughts about my criteria here, if you think I should add or change the wording or just, either broaden or narrow my choices here, please let me know. Again, I'm hoping to make this a recurring series for every single every single type. So any input would be greatly encouraged here. But let's get right into the actual teams I created. Starting off with Kanto, and like I said, there were no dark types available in Kanto. The typing didn't start until Johto, but luckily there were some dark types introduced in the Alolan games as Kanto variants. So, and because those are available in the Let's Go games, I'm allowing those to make this team. So, because there are exactly three, I'm saying he is the fourth gym leader, and he'll have an Alolan Persian, Alolan Raticate, and Alolan Muck. I felt like this was an approximate power level to that of Erica. Her victory bell technically would be stronger than Alolan Persian and Raticate, but I really couldn't justify this guy being any later. I think Koga should be a little stronger, but any earlier would also be a little weird, I thought. So I like this team a lot. And as far as the little the trainer icon here, I essentially for all of these, I went through every single trainer class available across all of these different regions and essentially determined the model that I thought looked the most like a dark type specialist. And of those dark type specialists, the one that looked the most like a gym leader. So for here, I picked, I think he's called a cue ball or the roughneck, whatever they decided to call him in. Let's go. I thought he just gave a very strong vibe of dark type gym leader. However, kind of later in development of this, I did think it would be kind of interesting if the fourth gym of this theoretical Kanto game that had dark types available, because all of these are from technically from the Alolan region, I thought it would be fun if in this specific case, the trainer is actually essentially a foreign exchange student from Alola, and he modeled after the ace trainers from that region, just reskinned to have more of a dark aesthetic. Either works. If you want it to be native to this region, you can say that it's this cue ball here. But I also like the idea of it being this foreign trainer who came here. Maybe Kanto, you know, wanted to get with the times and have a dark specialist, but maybe they couldn't make the journey to Johto, or they, just for whatever reason couldn't get any other dark types. And they knew that there were Kanto Pokemon who had regional variants in Alola, so they brought this guy over here. Either way, I think could work very well. Next up with Johto, I decided to make this the second gym. Um, I really like the idea of Sneasel being the ace at this point. It's kind of a glass cannon where it's extremely fast and has a pretty high attack power, especially for what was at the time a single stage, but even as a first stage of a two-stage line, it's still, I think, pretty good with attack and speed. However, in Gen 2 specifically, it couldn't really use its special, dark or ice types super well. Um, but as far as being able to attack physically, I think it's pretty good as an ace. And then having Murkrow and Houndour, uh, I believe the only two other first stage dark types of the region, or even single stage of Murkrows at the time, I think that makes for a pretty solid second gem. And once again, I couldn't really justify this being any later because I think Whitney's Miltank, just the strength that thing possesses, just definitely outclasses these. But it definitely shouldn't be any earlier either. I think wholesale, this is about the level of strength that Bugsy would have. And one thing I want to bring up here is my design philosophy, ideally, when making all of these all of these teams in this video and future videos. Ideally, especially with the earlier gyms, I would want these gym leaders to have Pokemon that the trainer would not have access to seeing at any point before fighting this gym. So ideally, the players going through the Johto region, uh, assuming they're playing like normal, unless in this theoretical game, unless the villain team or the rival has a Murkrow or Houndour, the player may not even know that the dark type exists. So then they get to this region, this gym, and they see this guy with dark types, and the player might not even know how to deal with them yet. Like I think that kind of thing is what I want to get at when making these teams, not just throw a bunch of Pokemon that the player has already fought a bunch of times. That's part of the reason why I don't really love Grimsley's Elite Four team in Black and White because his Liepard, you fought a million Liepards at that point. Whereas here, Murkrow, Houndour, and Sneasel would be unique to the player up to this point. Next up with Hoenn, this was the one that was probably the trickiest to actually make the team of. I definitely knew where I wanted it to be. I knew I wanted this to be where Flannery was with the fourth gym from Emerald specifically to give her four Pokemon. However, I wasn't really sure what their ace should be. And even now, I'm not exactly sure if I chose correctly. I had it down between Crawdaunt, Cacturn, and Shiftry. I like all three of those a lot. All three of them can work very well as earlier aces. Um, and I like Cacturn because, like I said before, the player would never even come close to seeing a Cacturn. They probably wouldn't have even seen a Cacnea at that point since you don't have access to the desert area until after this gym. But I eventually landed on Crawdaunt being the ace. Again, this being the fourth gym with Mightyena, Sableye, Nuzleaf, Crawdaunt. Now, ideally, this this gym would exist in a world where the villain team doesn't use Mightyena. Um, there there weren't a lot of other, you know, great dark types for this point in the game. Like maybe you could switch out Mightyena for for Carvana, but even then, if you're playing playing Sapphire or even Emerald, you still would be fighting a lot of Carvana. So unless you want to only give them three Pokemon, which considering the whole team, I don't really love that. I do think Mightyena being able to lower the opponent's attack power, that way their fighting moves don't deal as much damage. And he throws out Sableye, which fighting doesn't even affect at all. And then I like the idea of all of them having different secondary types. Mightyena being pure dark, Sableye having a secondary ghost typing, Nuzleaf being part grass, and then Crawdaunt being part water. The reason I went with Crawdaunt over Cacturn is that reasoning where I wanted all of them to have a different dual typings, whereas if I had put Cacturn there, I just don't love the idea of Nuzleaf and Cacturn both being part grass. And I couldn't justify putting both Crawdaunt and Cacturn on the same team. So I think this is an overall very solid team for the fourth gym. But I just want to point out this trainer guy here, I don't remember what his trainer class is. I don't know where you fight him in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, but man, he looks cool. I found a lot of really neat trainer class models that won't necessarily all show up in this video, but I have a lot of they went hard with a lot of different trainer class models that we'll be seeing a lot later. But just for right now, I want to shout out this guy. He looks cool. He definitely looks like a gym leader. Next up, Sinnoh. Now, this one, I know kind of two things with this. I know with the first criteria, I said I didn't want to just throw a bunch of strong dark types there at the end of the game and say, oh, this is just default eighth gym leader. But in this case, there are several very imposing, very impressive dark types that I think it only makes sense for for the Sinnoh region to have a dark gym leader. If anything, I think I could even see a justification for this gym for this gen to have a dark Elite Four member. And that's kind of how I'll be rationalizing any eighth gym leaders going forward with any of these videos. Essentially, if there are five or more just very powerful Pokemon in this region of the type I'm working with, if they're at the eighth gym, I'm like, if I were making the list, I would probably, if I were making the region from scratch, I would honestly just make them an Elite Four member. But because of the constraints of the video, I'm saying they're a gym leader. However, in most of those cases, I do plan on also doing a second gym where it's like this is, you know, as strong as I can make them, given that they're a gym leader. But I also want to have a gym leader earlier in the region, which is like if, yeah, this is probably the eighth gym is where it should be. But let's say, if the dark type gym leader were also the third gym, this is what it would be as well. And again, that makes sense in just a second because with Sinnoh, again, the eighth gym leader having Spiritomb, Drapion, Weavile, Honchkrow. That is an amazing team. That is easily just that by itself, even for Pokemon, especially going off of Gen 5 logic, that alone is Elite Four level tier. Like add Absol or Houndoom or Skuntank onto that team. Houndoom would be ideal because then you have every Pokemon having a different secondary type. Um, And this is also specifically what I was talking about, where every other major trainer, all of their Pokemon are fair games. Spiritomb is on Cynthia's team, Drapion is on Aaron's team, and then Weavile and Honchkrow are both on Cyrus's team. So I understand why they didn't do a Dark Specialist in this gen because all the Dark types were used up already. But if they weren't, if it's just, in a vacuum, this is the team that I would give him. I think this is one of the most impressive elite four tier, but gym leader teams, you know, I think possible, really. But like I said, I also did create another weaker gym, that being the third gym, either Fantina or Maylene, depending on the game. I think Murkrow, Sneasel, and a Skuntank being the ace makes a solid third gym. I could also maybe hear an argument for this being the second gym, but Skunting only having the one weakness, and like I said before, Sneasel being being the glass cannon that it is, and Murkrow honestly being no slouch either. I think this being, around third gym tier feels about right. Next up with you, Nova. This one I kept going back and forth on about what exactly I wanted the team to look at because I knew the three Pokemon I wanted for this, and I was pretty sure I wanted to be sixth gym, but then I was like, oh, there's this other one that I maybe wanted to add on to make it seventh, but I eventually decided to narrow it down to the sixth gym, having Zoroark, Zweilous, and Krookodile. Maybe you could say this should be the seventh gym with the Mandibuzz, but I kind of went back and forth on that, especially with the shenanigans I want Zoroark to get up to. I essentially want him to throw out Zoroark first, disguised as Krookodile. So if the player has a grass or a water type out there, it can U-turn into Zweilous, who is possibly holding an Eviolite. It doesn't have to be, but I think that could be fun just to give it a little, to make it a little beefier. And then Zweilous, who is out there, is able to tank those grass and water types. Um, and then hit back with hustle boosted dark type moves. And then he can switch back into Zoroark, and the player doesn't know if it actually is Zoroark or if he actually is sending out Crocodile now. And then you can go from there. If we're the seventh gym and he had Mandibuzz out there, you lead with a bug or a fighting type. He could switch out into Mandibuzz, and then it can at least take neutral damage to those bug and fighting type attacks. But I in the end did decide sixth gym is fine. He can use those shenanigans more in a post-game rematch where he has a full team of five or six, add Bisharp and or Bandibuzz, or I'm sure there's Scrafty or whatever other previous gen dark type, but As far as the sixth gym, I think this is a very solid team. Mostly because I think after the sixth gym, at that point, if you don't have a team full of fully evolved Pokemon, I think you're doing it wrong. Um, so even if it is, the second stage of a pseudo legendary evolution, if you have no other options, I think seventh and eighth should by no means ever have not fully evolved Pokemon. Ideally, anyway. So because I wanted Zweilous here, I think sixth gym is appropriate for this. And I like the idea. I really meant to talk about this in my like big gym leader analysis video I did a few months back, but I think it will be really, really cool if in the Unova games, all of the gym leaders had the type boosting gym of their type. For example, Crocodile here, the first time it goes to use Crunch, it's boosted by the Dark Gym, making that move even stronger. I think if this game were made after Gen 6 or if they decide to implement that as a like actual battle mechanic, I guarantee that's what they would have done. They kind of fell into a rut of just having every single gym leader's ace, just having a citrus berry or appropriate berry. But I think if they had instead wanted to implement the whole battle mechanic thing one gen earlier, I do think the type boosting gyms would have been what they would have done. So that'll be a constant throughout every single Unova gym leader going forward. Next up, Kalos. And for Kalos, specifically, I don't know exactly the cutoff here, but I do know for a fact in all of these future videos, if ever there is at least a seventh or eighth gym, they have to have a Mega Stone. If possible, I'm pretty sure there should be options for every type, but ideally, sixth, seventh, or eighth gym will have a Mega Stone. I could even hear arguments for sixth, maybe even fifth, like second half of the game, all of them start using Mega Stones, especially if the rest of the team is kind of balanced around that. But at least in this case, this person here is the seventh gem using Malamar, Skuntank, Houndoom Mega with a Mega Stone, and then Pangoro. I just felt like Pangoro was one of those Pokemon in Kalos that just got completely shafted. No major trainers used them, just used it despite there being a fighting specialist. I just think it should have been on a major team somewhere in Kalos, but it wasn't. I feel it's ripe for being the ace of a later gym, being six or seven. So because this is the seventh gym, I think Pangoro being the ace along with Mega Houndoom, I think that's really cool. The Skuntank here, for a while, that was actually Bisharp. I could see one, either way, but the idea was I wanted whatever that slot to be. I wanted to be one that would be super effective into Fairy. Um, because Fairy was the you know big new type introduced in this generation. I wanted her to have one Pokemon that would be good into other Fairy types that they would the player would potentially take into this gym. And then I also wanted the Mega Pokemon to be not weak to Fairy. It just so happens that both Skuntank and Houndoom, and also Bisharp, who I was considering, all of them are also not weak to Bug either. So I just think this is a very well constructed team, especially for the seventh gym. I could even hear an argument for this being eighth gym level, especially since Skuntank only has the one weakness. You can't just, fly through this team with a fighting or bug type. Skuntank would resist both. So, but yeah, I do think seventh gym is about right for this. And this is kind of what I was saying before, where it'll be approximate the same, if not a little stronger, because infamously, the Kalos gym leaders, all of them only use three Pokemon. So I think by the time you get to the seventh gym, you should have at least four. So yeah, and that fourth being a Mega Stone makes complete sense. Next up, we have Alola, and this gen doesn't historically have um doesn't historically have you know gym leaders. However, we're just gonna say that they do now. I'm not gonna do a thing where, oh, if this region had a kahuna that was this type. No, I'm gonna say gym leaders. This is more so gonna be just kind of based on vibes because I know that it'd be kind of hard to scale the levels, because the kahunas aren't the it's a little more complicated. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there with future videos because I decided that the Lola should have a dark gym leader be the first gym, that being Volibee, Carvanha, Wool, and Raticate. As previously discussed, there were a bunch of, or three uh Kanto Pokemon that got the dark typing with their Alolan variant. However, unless I misremember something or my research failed me, those were the only dark types as far as like regular Pokemon introduced in the region. So I didn't really want to just give her Alolan Eradicate, Meowth, and Grimer. I wanted it to be a little more creative than that. So I essentially went with two Pokemon I passed over previously, that being Volibee and Carvanha. And again, I like Volibee being here where it's not the strongest. It can't really hit that hard, but it's defensively pretty strong and also isn't weak to bug or fighting. And then Carvanha is just a fast glass cannon. And then Alolan Raticate is it as far as the first gym, I think a decent enough challenge. All right, moving on to Galar, the first generation to actually have a dark gym leader. Um, so, like I said, I'm not gonna be reusing uh Obstagoon here. So I can still use other Pokemon in that line, but Obstagoon specifically, I will not be using on this team. Luckily, there are, I would say, at least two Pokemon I could have pulled from to be the ace, but I went with Grimmsnarl, who is one of my favorite Pokemon from this gen, especially since he has that Gigantamax form. And everyone past the third gym in this generation used the Gmax form. Grimmsnarl having one just make perfect sense. And then Thievul, Morpeko, and Galarian Linoone. Um, I can hear an argument for Galarian Linoone being switched out with some other dark type. Uh, but this team specifically was modeled more so after Alistair's team from Shield, where yeah, he had four Pokemon, but one of those was a Galarian Yamask, whereas Bea had the Sirfetch'd. I felt um I felt having one Pokemon that isn't fully evolved can still make sense for the fourth gym. Also, I want to just point out, I think it'd be very funny if the like I couldn't really find any trainer models from this generation that really looked, evil or hooliganish or whatever. So I went with this, cop character. I don't know. I think it'd be very funny considering he just has a very cheerful demeanor that, could be hiding something. His face, yeah, it's happy, but there's something inherently kind of creepy about it. And also historically, um especially in Gen 4, you only ever fought the police type characters at night. So since you historically fought them at night, I think it kind of works on multiple levels here. So I just wanted to point that out. All right. And lastly, Paldea. So I don't know if I'm going to do this every time, but at least in this instance, similar to the Sinnoh region, I actually created three different teams for this region. Um, I essentially wanted to capture the essence of the three different kinds of Terra forms that gym leaders or other major trainers used. One being a one that the Elite Four members use, where they just have a Pokemon of their type, they Terra into that type, so that way they can use. their stabs even stronger. Another one where it's a Pokemon that is, you know, that is of their type, but it tears into a different type to help them either offensively or defensively. And then the last one where it's a Pokemon not of their type specialty that tears into their type specialty. So I wanted to make three different teams reflecting all of those different ways that the Terra can enhance their team. So first off, I went with just, straight up eighth gem. Um, I wanted King Gambit to be the ace of this team. King Gambit is kind of technically the ace of the Team Star guy, Giacomo, I think is the name, and then also the champion in her rematch. But neither of those are gym leaders or Elite Four members, technically. So I'm gonna say King Gambit's fair game here. But it's fine because I have two other teams that can easily just say those are the canon teams. So we'll say this works for now. So we have Mabostiff, Low Kicks, Bombardier, Umbreon, another Pokemon that I haven't used up to this point that I kind of wanted to show some love somewhere. And then King Gambit that tears into the dark typing to have his Sucker Punches and Kowtow Cleaves do even more damage. I toyed around with low kicks being switched out for a crocodile or some other stronger dark type, but I decided to stick with low kicks for two reasons. One, that it is a dark type from this region, and it's honestly one of my favorite Pokemon from this generation. And two, I did want there to be some kind of separation between the strength of a gym leader and the strength of an Elite Four member. If this were an Elite Four member, low kicks absolutely could be a crocodile. Honestly, Bombardier could maybe even also be switched out for something. But even though you are the last and strongest gym leader, I do think there should be one Pokemon on your team that's maybe not the absolute strongest. Lokix is still good. It's definitely a glass cannon. It does what it does very well, especially if it were given its hidden ability Tinted Lens. But if it's hit by almost anything, it'll go down in one or two hits. But I think the makeup of this eighth gym is honestly ideal for the region. But I also made one with the fourth gym. This is kind of what I was talking about, where I made, the eighth gym and then worked backwards to make the rest of them. But I think it works here. So for the fourth gym, having the Mastiff, Low Kicks, and then Bombardier, which tears into a fairy typing. So not only does Bombardier by itself, you know, is it itself not weak to fighting or bug, it also tears into another type that is not weak to fairy, no, not weak to um, bug or fighting. And then if it knows Terra Blast, it can then be super effective into fighting types that you might want to, take in to try to take out the gym. Um, anyway, this isn't the perfect fit since Bombardier can learn, flying moves anyway, and that already kind of fixes those problems. But I still think that this works. I could hear an argument for Mabostiff even being the ace and having Bombardier start the battle for the same reasons that with it not, resisting, with it not being weak to the types that Dark is usually weak to, and then can fight back against them, and then Mabostiff in the back can tear into this fairy type and throw people off. But something about Bombardier for me just feels good for the fourth gem. It doesn't really matter, I think, but um yeah, I think this is a decent makeup. But I did have one more, and I am genuinely shocked that they didn't do this. It is honestly at this point a meme in the Pokemon community how this Pokemon is basically the poster child for a Pokemon that doesn't have the right typing. I know its Pokedex entries say otherwise, but just design-wise, moveset, just almost everything about it just screams dark typing, yet it itself is not a dark type. So through this here, I am gonna say that in this specific instance, Luxray is a dark type. It just feels like the kind of thing they would do in the same way that Crabominable being a crab Pokemon that isn't normally a water type, they made into a water type. And there's several other pseudo Wudo actually becoming a grass type. For the fifth gym of Paldea, Luxray is now a dark type. I think that's a lot of fun. Okay, so thank you so much for watching. Once again, please let me know any comments, criticisms, concerns, just any input you have about this video, any Pokemon you felt I missed at any point, any Pokemon you don't agree would be the ace, any gym leaders you think should be earlier or later, just any thoughts about, anything presented in the video, please, I would love to have a discussion. Like I said, I plan on making this an entire series on this channel, so any input will improve those videos going forward. So with all that, I will see you all next time.